normally start a PC build video by telling you just how powerful it is, and putting on real emotion with my most dramatic voice possible. Now make no mistake, this is indeed one almighty PC, capable of chugging through just about anything, regardless of whether it's for work or play. But as for whether I'd actually recommend this to everyone, I'm not quite so sure. And the reason for all of this is the brand new Intel CPU that you'll find inside this thing. Or at least I say brand new, it is pretty much a refresh of what we've seen before, except it is now slightly more powerful, but a whole lot cheaper. Now when I say cheap, this 12-core CPU still costs around about $700 or pounds, which for a processor alone is not exactly pocket money. But if you compare this to the previous generation, it is actually a whole lot more affordable. Now the immediate comparison that you're probably going to want to draw up is to Ryzen or Threadripper, and this pretty much falls somewhere between those two for both features and speeds. The Ryzen 3950X does cost very similar money, but you can get a cheaper motherboard with only dual channel memory support, but then you'll get 4 more cores and it supports PCIe Gen 4. While you could go for a Threadripper, and this will have way more multi-threaded performance, but the whole system will cost you a whole lot more. And if you do like me talking about systems, don't forget that you can follow me over on Instagram. It's at PC Centric, and you can get the behind the scenes treatment on pretty much all of my builds, and maybe even ask me a thing or two if you want to get some advice on your own personal rig. If you're building maybe like a prosumer PC that is going to be doing some gaming but is going to be doing pretty much anything else as well, then I think a Ryzen at the moment is a really great option because you have so many choices and they're available at fantastic prices. If you want to go for a pure gaming rig, then Intel is probably still the choice if you're looking at literally just building a gaming computer. Whereas if you're looking at doing some really high-end stuff that money doesn't really matter to you that much, then clearly Threadripper at the moment seems to be the way to go for that. But what if you're like me? This is where things get a little bit more complicated, but actually I think X299 is still the right choice. I'm a bit of an odd one who works with 6K video files every single day, yet literally plays games for a living, whether it's testing computer monitors, peripherals, or of course the games themselves. Therefore, gaming is equally as important to me as the raw CPU performance. And as I need both, I'm still drawn towards a chip that can run circles around both multi and single threaded applications and games. But even at this stage, a Ryzen 3950X is clearly going to be a fantastic option for you, as it is so flexible, and if you do get maybe an apples to apples system and you're not worried about getting, I don't know, quad channel memory or something like that, then the Ryzen system still could make more sense to you. But there is one single but very notable exception that for me personally does draw me towards the X299 platform. And that is overclocking, which is of course all about pushing the chip to the max and getting the speeds as high as possible. And as you'll see from the results, in this very niche field of a gamer, producer and overclocker, I actually think X299 would still be my best bet. Now I'll give you a quick rundown on the PC that I've built here for testing. We have an Asus supplied CPU and motherboard, and this consists of the Intel 12-core 10920X as well as the Asus X299 Strix E Gaming 2. And this next generation board does actually look like a beefy step up versus the previous, with an extra PCIe SSD slot, and then a clever little display for BIOS codes and temperature monitoring, as well as extra cooling for extreme overclocking. I'm using my Nvidia RTX 2080 Super for graphics, 32GB of Corsair Vengeance RGB RAM at 3200MHz, and then the blazing fast Octane 900p for SSD storage, and of course a whole host of BeQuiet goodies. All of these are review samples, but I should note that the BeQuiet Silent Base 801 case that I'm using here is actually in preparation for a sponsored video that you will see shortly, where we'll be talking about a really cool little inverted build, and of course the pros and cons of actually doing this. But either way, if you do want to learn a little bit more about any of the parts featured, including current pricing, they are all linked with my Amazon affiliate links down below. So pretty much the whole point of this PC was for me to almost dip my toe into the waters a little bit and see exactly what this platform is capable of, as well as how far you can push these chips and ultimately how good they are for both gaming and workload performance. So the first thing that I did after putting it all together was to update the BIOS and then enable XMP on the memory to make sure that the results were pretty much as true and accurate as possible. And I would say that the results are what I almost expected. It's very similar workflow performance to something like a 2nd generation Threadripper chip, but then better performance in video games. The really interesting part though is just how much of a dramatic difference the multi-core enhancement feature in the Asus BIOS actually made to performance. And to be honest, it is a little bit worrying. I'm not sure whether this is because I enabled XMP, but for me this setting was actually on by default, which basically overclocks the processor all by itself without any user inputs. In my system, it raised the core voltage to 1.273 volts, while setting an all-core boost to 4.6 GHz, which, don't get me wrong, is excellent. It's going to provide a huge boost to performance, as you can see in these figures, but it just seems like way too much voltage for the overclock, and it actually raised the maximum temperatures in my admittedly misconfigured AIO system to around about 100 degrees, which is not good at all. Now this may sound like game over, but I took a step back and started doing some fine tuning until I found that I was actually able to yield some excellent results and a very promising future for my personal X299 system. So to start, the top placement of the cooler is just a poor move. There's not enough airflow up there, so I pulled the radiator out, opened up the side panel, and this was more to replicate a best case scenario. But if you're planning to use this exact case, then I would instead suggest that you put the radiator at the front. This immediately brought the temperatures tumbling down, but I was actually able to push this even further by lowering the voltage to 1.2 volts, and at this voltage I was still able to maintain that all-core speed of 4.6 GHz, but then have maximum temperatures of around about 80 degrees. Pushing it even further, however, I went to 1.29 volts, and at this voltage I was able to hit the mighty 4.8 GHz across all cores, which will of course have higher temperatures and power draw, but if you grab yourself a high airflow case and maybe something like a triple radiator all in one, it's not really something I would worry about. My ideal balance for this system would be to overclock it to 4.7 GHz at 1.27 volts, but as always, all chips are different, so be careful when you're overclocking your system, and of course do so at your own risk. All in all, it does look like there are still some great reasons to go for X299, especially if you are willing to overclock. So Ryzen may well have 4 extra cores, but you're looking at clock speeds of around about 4.1, 4.2, maybe 4.3 on the overclock. So I guess really it all comes down to exactly what it is you're going to be doing with your system and with your processor. As an enthusiast gamer and editor, I'm actually really happy to grab one of these and then overclock it with a custom liquid cooled loop, so happy days. But for the general user, I don't think this scenario is very realistic. So performance is going to be very similar if you grabbed a 3950X. Which one you should go for? Well, that's a very tough call. But either way, I am extremely happy that there are now 2 killer options trading blows. And I really can't wait to see what's in store next for both Team Red and Team Blue. Let me know what side you're on down in the comment section below. Would you go for a similar system like this and then overclock it to the max? Is that too risky, or would you just go for Ryzen in the first place? Really interested to hear your thoughts on this one, as well as the PC. Do you like almost like the seamless, timeless look, or would you go for something a bit more glassy or a bit more RGB? And of course, get subscribed for more videos just like this, more builds, more information. I don't know, all of these things. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.